Wow, you really sent us down a rabbit hole with this one, huh? This whole thing about, like politics and car sales, it's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. And, Tesla, it's really interesting what's going on. It's like this whole wild mix.
Exactly. And that's why we're doing this deep dive, right? We're looking at all the stuff you sent us about Tesla and especially like Elon Musk and all his politics, right? It's getting a lot of attention these days, and we're going to try to figure out like what does it mean for Tesla, the company?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, your sources, they make some pretty good points about how all this political stuff Musk is doing, like how it could actually be affecting Tesla, like how much money they're making, what people think about the brand, and even like how many cars they're selling, around the world.
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. There are like financial things to look at, and then there's like the whole public image thing, and then the sales numbers themselves, right? We're gonna try to like connect the dots using what you sent us.
Cool. Sounds good. So I guess the first thing that jumps out from the article is, well, the money part, right? Like right after Trump got elected, there was this jump, in Tesla's stock price. Why do you think that was? Like, why were people so optimistic at first?
Well, the article kind of hints that, investors were thinking, okay, maybe things will be better for businesses with Trump in charge,
Yeah.
right? Maybe he'd like, get rid of some of those pesky regulations, especially in the car industry.
Yeah, makes sense.
And maybe even, push for people to buy more electric cars with like government programs and stuff. And people probably figure that Musk, being, Musk, he could really take advantage of all that.
Right. Uses influence, connections, all that.
Exactly.
But okay, so that good feeling, it didn't last very long, did it? I mean, that 11% drop in Tesla's stock price, like right after Election Day, that's a pretty big deal? What do you think happened there? Like, why did things change so fast?
Well, from what I can see in these sources, it seems like that drop, it happened right around the time Musk started, like really getting into politics publicly.
Mhm.
And it looks like that's what made a lot of people, well, kind of mad. I mean, the articles even talk about all these protests against Musk, like at Tesla showrooms in the U.S. and Europe.
Oh, yeah, I read about those. Like, people were really upset.
Yeah, and it went beyond just protesting. There were some pretty serious incidents, like vandalism and even like arson. They even attacked like those supercharger stations and even individual cars.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, when I was reading about the vandalism and stuff, it was kind of scary? And the article actually called it domestic terrorism in a few places, which is like a pretty intense term?
It is. I mean, it really show you how strong people's feelings can get,
Yeah.
you know? Like when they really don't like something and then they like decide to, not buy a certain product because of it. It's like their beliefs are affecting their spending habits.
Yeah, it's a powerful thing. And like from a practical point of view, all that stuff costs Tesla money, right? Like they have to spend more on security, and then there's the damage to the cars and the charging stations and
Exactly. And then there's like the whole damage to their brand image, right? Like people might start thinking of Tesla as being associated with like all this negativity and conflict. And that kind of stuff makes investors nervous.
totally. I mean, Tesla always tried to be this like cool aspirational brand, right? Like it's not just a car, it's a statement. And this whole thing with the politics, it kind of messes with that image?
For sure. It's like suddenly there's this baggage attached to the brand that wasn't there before.
Okay, so let's switch gears a bit and talk about Musk's role in the government. He was like the head of the Department of Government Efficiency under Trump, right? That's a pretty important job, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, that kind of position, it gives you like direct access to how the government works.
Yeah.
Right. You can like influence policies and regulations that are relevant to your businesses like Tesla.
So was it a good thing for Tesla? Like, did it help him push his agenda?
Well, that's where things get a bit tricky. You see, instead of people seeing him as like this neutral expert, trying to make the government work better, the article says it actually made the whole political divide around him even worse.
Oh, I see. So it backfired a little bit.
Kind of, yeah. It's like
Hmm.
it made people who already disagreed with him even more suspicious.
Right. And then there was that whole thing with him supporting the AfD in Germany, right? Like,
Mm.
that's a pretty big deal, especially in a country where Tesla has, like, that huge factory in Berlin.
Yeah, I mean, people's political views are often really deeply held,
Right.
right? And when the leader of a company, like, publicly supports a specific political party, it risks, like, pushing away a lot of customers who, have different views.
Mm.
And in Germany, especially with its history, that kind of thing can be really sensitive. Yeah, those protests in Germany, they sounded pretty intense. Like, projecting that image onto the factory. That's uh, pretty powerful stuff. And the article said it wasn't just protests, right? Like Tesla cars in Europe, especially in Germany, they also got vandalized, just like in the U.S.
Yeah, that's a really important point. It's like the backlash wasn't just online or just people marching in the streets. People were taking it out on the actual product. Like
Yeah.
they were really angry. And that kind of thing, it can definitely hurt sales.
Absolutely. Okay, so now let's get to the really important part, the sales numbers, right? Because we can talk about stock prices and brand image all we want, but if people aren't buying the cars, then none of it really matters. So let's start with North America, the U.S. being Tesla's second biggest market. That drop in used Tesla prices you mentioned from $70,000 in 2022 to under $30,000 in 2025, that's huge. What does that tell us? Well, usually when you see used car prices drop that fast, it means people aren't as interested in buying the new ones anymore. Even if Musk says Tesla cars are, like, super high quality, if the used ones are going for so much less, it makes people think twice about paying full price for a new one.
Yeah, it's like the value just isn't there anymore.
Right.
Okay, and then over in Europe, things don't look much better, do they? A 40% drop in sales across the whole continent in early 2025, that's a big deal. And then if you look at places like Germany and France, Model 3 sales were down like 40% to 60% compared to last year. That's got to be worrying for Tesla, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, Germany was supposed to be like this huge market for Tesla, especially after they built that giant factory there. So seeing such a big drop in sales there, it kind of seems like all that negative stuff we were talking about earlier, the protests and the political stuff, it might be actually making people decide to buy other electric cars instead of Teslas.
Yeah, that makes sense. But wait, there's one interesting thing, right? The UK, their sales actually went up by 20%. And the article said it might be because people there aren't as bothered by Musk's politics. It's kind of weird how these things can be so different in different places, right?
Yeah, it really shows you that, like, this whole thing with Musk and politics, it's not affecting everyone the same way around the world. Different countries, different cultures, they have different reactions.
Makes sense. Okay, so let's talk about China, which was Tesla's biggest market in 2024 with like 660,000 deliveries. But even there, sales dropped by 11% in February 2025. Is that just a blip or is it something more serious?
Oh, a drop of 11% in a market as big as China. That's something you definitely got to pay attention to. It could be, a bunch of different things causing it, like maybe the economy slowing down a bit, or maybe those Chinese EV companies are getting better.
Yeah, those guys are really stepping up their game.
Exactly. But when you combine it with, like, the bad news in other parts of the world, it does paint kind of a not so great picture for Tesla, right?
Yeah, for sure. And the article mentions this crazy thing like Tesla's exports from China, they plummeted by 87%, especially to places like Australia. It seems like those local brands are really taking over, huh?
Yeah, it does seem that way. It looks like Tesla is facing some pretty tough competition in places outside of China now. Like, these local brands, they're making cars that are just as good and often cheaper. And, well, some people might just prefer to buy local.
Support their own country's businesses.
Exactly.
Australia is a good example, right? Like they had this massive 72% drop in sales in February 2025, and the article says it's because of BYD, that Chinese company. Apparently, their BYD seal is actually outselling the Tesla Model 3 there now. That's a pretty big deal.
It is. It is. Australia really shows you how much things are changing. Like, when people have a choice between a Tesla and, let's say, a BYD, and the BYD is cheaper and maybe even better in some ways, then, things like brand image and, what people think about the CEO, it starts to matter a lot
Because
more.
suddenly those things become a bigger deal when there are other good options available.
All right, exactly.
Okay, so, we've talked about all these challenges, but then you look at what Musk is saying about Tesla's future, and it's almost like he's living on a different planet. I mean, even with all these sales drops and stuff, the article mentions how in that January 2025 earnings call, he is still super optimistic, like, saying that Tesla could be worth more than the next 5 biggest companies combined, like 18 times bigger than it is now. That seems kind of crazy given everything we just talked about.
Yeah, it is a really ambitious prediction, to
Yeah.
say the least. And, looking at what's actually happening in the market, it seems a bit out of touch with reality. I mean, it's one thing for a CEO to be positive and confident, but this just seems, I don't know, a bit too much.
A bit too much hype.
Yeah, maybe. Like, where's the evidence?
Exactly. And then there's that whole thing about the Optimus robot, right? Like Musk is saying it could make trillions of dollars and completely change the way we work. But it all seems so far-fetched, like the technology just isn't there yet.
Yeah, the Optimus robot is definitely a moonshot idea, for sure. And if it actually works the way Musk wants it to, it could be a really big deal. But, the article does point out that, well, it's not exactly realistic to expect it to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, and we can't forget about that We Robot event back in October 2024, right? The article mentions how the robots they showed off, they were actually being controlled remotely, like here's a fake demonstration. That doesn't exactly make you think, oh yeah, these robots are gonna be taking over the world anytime soon.
Right. And think about it. If they're still struggling to get their cars to drive themselves, which is a lot simpler than a robot that can walk and talk and do all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, it makes you wonder.
It does. It does.
Okay, so putting it all together, it seems like the main takeaway from all this stuff you sent us is that, well, Musk's politics are definitely causing problems for Tesla. Like, it's hurting their brand image, and there's more competition now, and it's all kind of adding up to a pretty tough situation for them.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate summary. Tesla is still a big name. People recognize the brand all over the world, but it's not the only game in town anymore.
Yeah.
And all this stuff with Musk and his political views, it's making it easier for people to say, hey, you know what? I think I'll buy a different electric car instead.
Yeah, especially with so many new options out there now, right? Like BYD and all these other companies, they're making really good cars that are often cheaper than Tesla's. So if someone's already annoyed with Musk, it's like, why not switch?
Exactly. It's like consumers have more power now.
Mm.
They can choose a car based on like not just how it drives, but also on what the company stands for,
Ah,
And
yeah.
if they don't like what they see, they can easily go somewhere else.
And so the big question is, can Musk fix this? Or is Tesla like actually going downhill?
It's a tough one to answer. You know,
Yeah.
there's so many things going on. It depends on if Musk, maybe tones it down a bit with the politics and if Tesla can keep making really innovative cars that people want to buy. And then there's the whole like global economy and politics and all that. It's complicated.
Very complicated. Well, this has been a really interesting deep dive. I mean, it's kind of worrying, but also like really eye-opening,
Yeah.
to see how all this stuff with politics and business, it's all connected.
It really is. It's like you
Yeah.
can't separate them anymore. And Musk and Tesla, they're like the perfect example of that.
So for you listening out there, we just went through a lot of information, right? We looked at how Musk's politics might be affecting Tesla's, like stock price and sales and stuff. And we talked about all the competition they're facing now and those crazy future plans like the Optimus robot. It's a lot to think about.
It is. And it really comes down to this. What do you think is the biggest problem for Tesla right now? Is it all the negative attention because of Musk's politics? Is it all these other car companies making awesome electric cars? Or is it just that Tesla is, I don't know, maybe trying to do too much too fast? Like those robots, are they even realistic?
Yeah, it's a lot to consider, and we definitely encourage you to keep learning about this stuff. Maybe check out what companies like BYD are doing or see what Musk is saying these days, It's all changing so fast, it's hard to keep up.
But hopefully this deep dive has given you some food for thought, like how to think about the connections between, a company and its leader and what people
Yeah.
think about them and whether they succeed or not.
Yep.
It's all intertwined.
It really is. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll catch you next time.